Hi, my name is Chang, and I'm here with Pontus Granström, and we made Scrappy, which is a tool that lets you make little apps for you and your friends. Um, what do we mean by little apps for you and your friends? Some examples of these scraps, as we call them, are math exercises for your kid or a chores tracker for your family. So these are small, everyday kinds of problems that kind of require custom solutions, basically the long tail. But you can't implement these kinds of things in a spreadsheet. So this is the perfect space for end user programming. So that's the scope of Scrappy. It's the stuff on the left and not the stuff on the right. Um, for making little apps for you and your friends, we don't have to care about scaling to millions of users. We we're not trying to replace things like React. Um, Last year at Live, Jonathan Edwards gave a great keynote talk where he compared substrates versus the stack. And the stack is basically all the layers of software that we're talking about on the right here. And Pontus and I both hate the stack. It's no fun. But the point here is that for making little apps for you and your friends, the stack is just overkill. And since we're talking about end user programming, of course, we have to mention spreadsheets. And the way to think about spreadsheets is that you're working with data, and then you can sprinkle on a little bit of computation just where you need it. And it's exactly the same with HyperCard, which is the one other gold standard of end user programming. It's media with a little bit of computation sprinkled on top. So um, as a result, both spreadsheets and HyperCard feel like productivity tools. They don't feel like programming environments, even though you can arguably do programming in them. The data is just there in front of you. You can see it, you can manipulate it, walk away and come back, and it's still there. So we use words like live, tangible, persistent to describe these nice qualities. Um, we forget that spreadsheets actually started out as paper. So really, spreadsheets and HyperCard are simulating physical media. So of course they're live, tangible, persistent. Um, but the point here is that um, with spreadsheets and HyperCard, you're working with data first and foremost, and then the computation part is secondary. And then we have modern productivity apps where you are working with data and media. They are live and tangible and persistent, but there's no computation. In Figma, you can draw a button, but you can't really bring it to life. In Notion, you can put in your information, you can kind of organize it, but you can't do more with it. But there is this nice modern way of collaboration that we like with these tools, where you click a share button, you get a share link, and you send it to somebody, and the other person can you can see each other in the same space, and you can collaborate in real time. Um, so that brings us to Scrappy. We wanted something that feels like a productivity tool, not a programming environment, that is live, tangible, and persistent, but also collaborative, and lets you sprinkle some computation on top. So let's show you what we mean with a demo.
Thank you, John. I am Pontus, and this is Scrappy. I can drag in a button, and then I can inspect it in the inspector panel, change its properties. An important property is the when clicked, where I can type some code to make the button move itself when clicked. So now it moves when I click it. Maybe I'll drag in another object, a timer. I can set its duration, make it repeat, and I'll make it also move the button, but in the other direction. So now I can click the timer to start it, and the button starts moving in the other direction. So you can see, working in Scrappy, we are working with these tangible objects that we feel very familiar to people. And we attach a little bit of code, sprinkle some computation on top to make them do stuff together. And the environment is always live, so there's no distinction between running and building. It feels like a productivity tool. But let me show you a more realistic example. Here I've made a little scrap for counting the number of attendees at a venue. I can click enter when people enter at the door and exit when they leave. And if I go above capacity, I'm showing this little warning message. So how does this work? Well, the enter button has a little bit of code that increments the value of the attendees object. This is what we call a tangible variable. It's like a text field. Here is the number field. I can type values into it. I can modify its value. But importantly, it persists. So if I close and then open again, it behaves just like a cell in a spreadsheet. The data is there. I'm working with the data. It's not volatile. And it also syncs for free. So I can share a view of this app with a friend, and they could be standing at one of the entrances of the venue and be tapping these buttons, and it's all stays in sync. I can even move and edit and add new features while my friend is using the app. So that's the demo. And now I want to talk a little bit about what we learned working on this and things we want to share and discuss with the community. So first up are these tangible variables. But first, let me talk about what an intangible variable is. These are the ones we're used to. You declare something in code, cost per minute, and then you think of it as a box that you put a value into. That value lives in volatile memory and RAM, and so it goes away when the app is closed, and therefore you have to write some more code to make it persist to disk and to load it from disk. And you also have to write code to talk to servers if you want to sync it with someone. Meanwhile, you have to keep all this in your head. And when you're writing code, you have to think about what could the values possibly be as you're writing the code, because you can't really see it. Contrast this with tangible variables, which are like Google Sheet cells. So they're a UI element. I can type into it. I can make it react to other values. I can modify it with buttons. And it's live, tangible, persistent, and collaborative, all for free, and I don't have to do anything extra. Great for simple apps like this, and we would love to see more people experiment with stealing this one feature from a spreadsheet. When we started this project, we were kind of anti-LLMs, or we didn't like the LLM hype train, and we decided not to use a lot of AI features in Scrappy. But as the months have gone on, we've become convinced that vibe coding is here to stay, and it is very useful for making simple things like what we're making in Scrappy. But when you're using Claude or Cursor or something like Lovable, while you might be prompting things, the AI is still writing text files. And it's sort of this traditional paradigm of the stack with lots of tools and lots of dependencies and lots of configuration you have to keep track of. And as a user, you eventually have to learn that stuff and interact with it, and it can be pretty daunting. So we think something like Scrappy could be a much better medium or substrate for making simple things, because we have these tangible objects on a canvas that you can look at and reason about, and there's just a little bit of code attached to each of them, just a sprinkle. And that's, we think, could be a much nicer and more humane way to collaborate with the AI and tell it what to do. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on what a medium for vibe coding could look like. This project was born out of the question, why isn't there a modern hypercard, a go-to tool for making small little apps for me and my friends without having to deal with all the complexity of the stack? And we've shown you some of our work in solving this from the design side, but we also realized there's a social component to it, because when we talk to people about making little apps like this, it's hard for them, it was even hard for us, to come up with small little problems that a tool like this would help solve. Because people are so used to going shopping for apps in an app store and like there already being a fixed solution, they don't think of making it themselves. And maybe this is because it's, you know, a tall order to learn programming just to make a few little scrappy apps. But think of knitting a sweater for your friend, or making your own bookshelf, or learning to play the piano. People do this because it's enriching, because it's fulfilling, because they want to learn stuff. And we were left with a question that we would love your thoughts on. Why isn't recreational programming more of a thing? This has been us. You can read more on the write-up or try Scrappy for yourself. Reach out if you have more questions, and hope to see you in the Q&A.